I am sorry about the late start. Last night, I was joking around about how, Volcana has been um, playing tricks on me in the hospitaler, and last night she didn't play any tricks. Um, so she started at about I don't know 12:30 at night. Me and the hospital were both getting ready to go to sleep, and then all of a sudden we hear her going off from her. We have her kennel at night, and she started going off, and we were like, "Oh, okay, um, time for this." So, we were up like she was up until about 4:30 in the morning. I kept the I kept the morning watch, and it was something else because of the amount of work that had to be done in there, and it was a very. There was one that was really tense, um, because you know like it was just there was just a lot of stuff going on. We almost lost one, and we don't know. One of them got hurt on the way out, and but I don't think it's going to be anything serious. The Volcana was trying to get them out because when they're born in this little sack, and you have to breach the sack. And um, when Volcana was doing that, she kind of nicked its paw a little bit. So we don't think it's going to be that bad. Um, but yeah, we were. I was up until about 8. God, when was I up till? Almost 9. And yeah, that was a lot. That was a lot of. It was a lot. Volcana is being a good mama dog. She's being a very good mama dog. I just left her right now. She's sitting down, and we actually had to show her. 'Cause when they were born, she just looked at them like, "Oh my God, what are these things? Like, what are they?" And we had to get her comfortable because she was scared of them. She didn't know what to think of them. And the last thing you want to have happen is the mother to reject the puppies, because then um, there would be no way for, like, we'd have to actually nurse them every 2 hours. And we have 4 now, and that's a thing. But she has not rejected them. They're right now. They were sitting with her, and yeah. So they're less than a day old, and they're a mess already. After I finish this, that's the reason I put the question mark at the end of this stream, because I don't know how long I'm gonna have today. But I'm gonna try to get through as much as I possibly can. When the hospitaler, because the hospitaler is asleep right now, we have been taking shifts because we just wanted to make sure everything's going well, everything's going right. When you breed dogs, if you're worth anything, you want to make sure that all the dogs are, we weigh them once a day. We make sure they're getting fed. If one of them is coming in, they're not, gaining weight, stuff like that, we put them on a 2-hour feeding diet where we literally feed them every 2 hours. She had 4 slacker. All of them survived. Um, there's one that's still a little bit touch and go, but we actually have stuff for that. Um, but oh yeah, like I was in Discord. We were in voice on the phone while we were sitting there trying to get something done. And one of the scariest moment was when one was born in breach, which is can be a dangerous thing, but it didn't cause any real problems. Um, what do I expect from the day's episode? Carnage. Absolute carnage. I'm actually glad I'm sitting down to do this because I didn't know if I was going to be able to do it. Phalia says, a few years ago, my German Shepherd birthed 8 puppies and it was stressful as hell. Sadly, one of the puppies did not make it through. Yes, in every litter, don't tell me it's going to start raining. In every litter, there's usually one that just does not make it. And we're trying to keep that from happening. Right now, everything's looking good. The names of the puppies are I named them, well, I didn't name them. The hospitaler, after arguing with me for months about this, yeah, that's loud. Yeah, after arguing with me for months about this, she sat there and she said, once the first puppy was born, we're naming them after the Trident. So, basically, they're named after the people in the Trident who have like people who have, you know, been around and been voice acting and stuff like that. And the first people I really talked to in voice, so it's Arcano, Strida, Alfarius, and Icy. And Alfarius is the only boy. So they're adorable. It looks like there's going to be 3 fawns, which is the standard like colored pug, and there's 1 black one, and the black one is Alfarius. So yeah, it's good stuff. It was really good stuff. I tried Slacker. I actually I recorded a short yesterday because I was going to name the first pug, because I was thinking I was only going to get 1. So I was going to name the first pug Pugmaldus. And like I had recorded it, and then she was like, "No, you're not going to name it Pugmaldus." Blah, blah, blah. I was like, "What?" Like, okay, what? So she started yelling at me in the middle of it. I was like, okay. And traditionally, when the hospital gets on something, you just lean back and let that tidal wave blow over. But yes, we have 4 pug puppies. They're all doing okay. The mother is being a good mom. Once I get done streaming, I'm gonna go in there. Oh my God, you guys. It was a absolute murder scene in that room. It was not good. Yes, there was a lot of flamer threats and stuff like that. But yeah, it was really stressful. But hey, it's good now. And they're in there right now. They're laid up against her, and she's just sitting there looking at me like, what do I do with these creatures? But yeah, they're adorable. In any case, All Guardsmen Party, the Redacted Conspiracy, parts 3 through whatever. We're going to get to it. So, who's ready to get started? I'm ready. Let's go. And I need to press buttons. There we go.
When the Marines' argument finally ended, with Hart Marine storming off towards the base's elevator and the apothecary returning to pick up his medical gear, Doc decided to see if he was allowed to ask questions now. It turned out that either the apothecary was a far friendlier space marine than any that we'd met, or perhaps Gravis had said something on Doc's behalf. Either way, we were finally given a rundown of the situation. Sergeant Gravis had testified. No, we would not be told how collecting said testimony had worked, because the mysteries of the Black Carapace were not for us to know.
Okay.
No, not even if it turned out that we were completely innocent. What part of not for us to know didn't we understand? No, the secret wasn't that all Space Marines were actually psychic, and our questions privileges would be revoked if we did not ask about something else. Gravis had said that we were a bunch of dangerous incompetents, but probably not heretics, and had backed us up in regards to the dangerousness of the Demonthrope, if not the demonness. The Inquisitor had been informed of this, but had been dubious about the reliability of Gravis's testimony. After a bit of debate, the Inquisitor and the Marines had decided that the Demonthrope would be immediately destroyed. Hart Marine was going down to observe the procedure, purely for reasons of protocol, of course.
No, don't send the Lamenter. Don't send the Lamenter.
The news that they were just going to kill the literally damned bug after we'd spent all that time and effort hauling it across the ass end of the Imperium did not go over well. I mean, we probably should have been happy, since it was supposed to be used as evidence of our crimes or something, but still. Anyway, Sarge made a spirited attempt to convince the Marines that our Demonthrope containment unit would work just fine if it was left alone.
You sent the Lamenter. Thank you, Daniel Morgan. Daniel says he figured out how they can be orcs. They're orcs that believe they're Imperial Guardsmen. That would actually work. That would actually work. Thank you, Daniel.
He was told that the Zoanthrope was an abomination in the eyes of the Emperor, and destruction was the only truly safe option. Twitch, who was coming back into focus after being tranked, loudly agreed with that sentiment, and was told that he was not being very helpful. And then it occurred to Tink that it would be very hard to kill the Demonthrope without removing it from the containment unit.
No, just put a whole bunch of explosives.
He asked the apothecary about this, and was told that standard procedure was to shove the whole thing into a plasma incinerator.
Okay.
Tink asked what would happen to Spot, got asked who Spot was, and got as far as before Amy and Nubby both grabbed him.
Yep.
The apothecary accepted Amy's explanation that he named the containment unit Spot. He's weird like that, without comment. It was at that point, as Tink was being dragged
Okay, this isn't too much, is it? Because there's nothing I can do about how loud this is.
away from the Marines and quietly being told that Theo could build him a new damn drone if we got out of this alive. That a horribly familiar chittery scratching sensation went through all of our heads.
Yay.
Veteran bug wranglers that we were, we immediately recognized the psychic screech as a sign of partial containment failure on the Demonthrope. At least we figured it was partial, you know, on account of how there weren't bugs coming out of the walls.
Yes.
Sarge immediately informed the two confused Space Marines of
They sent the Lamenter. They're doomed.
the situation, and abandoning all pretenses of diplomacy, demanded to know what the hell their boss was playing at. While Sarge unhelpfully yelled at the Marines, Tink pulled out his drone controller and announced that he'd started getting a faint signal through the jamming again. From what he could see, all the regular psi suppressors were offline. The Wraithbone one had been disabled, so only the stasis field was left keeping the Demonthrope in check. Feeling pretty sure that he knew what his orders would be if he asked for them, the techie immediately started mashing the button to re-engage the Wraithbone suppressor. Through some sort of miracle, the signal made it through, and the psychic pressure of the Demonthrope's mind began to diminish.
They're gonna fuck this
For
up.
about 10 seconds,
They
that
fucked
is.
it up.
Then Spot 2.0 reported a flagrant systems error, and a second psychic screech knocked all non-superhumans on the pad to their knees.
Oh, this is good.
Over by the Marines, Sarge and Doc hauled themselves back to their feet and practically begged the Astartes to do something. The two Deathwatch Marines ignored them and started arguing again.
God.
Since our guards were preoccupied and it looked like the shit was about to hit the fan either way, the rest of us decided this would be a good time to go collect all the weapons that had been left in the shuttle.
Good time, yeah.
Jim and the Adepts were left standing in the middle of the landing pad, viewing the situation with increasing alarm,
Yes.
and were therefore in the best position to observe what happened next. A third screech doubled everyone over again, and was followed by the sound of Fumbles screaming for someone to come help him before they all go loose.
Oh, God.
Then the entire pad shook, and a geyser of fire and blackish-green lightning shot out of the facility's roof.
See, this is what happens when you think you know shit. This is what happens when you're dealing with a whole bunch of people who are trying to warn you about something, but you think you know shit. You don't know anything.
As we all pulled ourselves upright and followed the standard guard post-explosion procedure of asking everyone else if they were dead, the Heart Marine punched his way through the elevator's doors.
Okay.
He began walking towards us, and then turned around as a pair of lightning-wreathed figures rose out of the flaming crater behind him.
This is good.
The closer figure was a human-looking shape, obscured by some sort of bluish energy bubble. Judging by the hat and coat it was wearing, plus the fact that the only other nearby psyker we knew of was currently screaming for help somewhere down below us, it was probably the Inquisitor. There was nothing indistinct about the second figure. It was the Demonthrope in all its horrible, unholy splendor.
This is what happens when you think you know what you're doing. This is what happens. Thank you, Daniel. Who do you think would win, Tybros the Red Wake or Lorgar? Dude, I'm always going to pick anyone over Lorgar. I'd pick a toddler. I'd pick one of my newborn pugs against Lorgar, okay? Lorgar just sucks. Lorgar is just absolute shit. I would pick a piece of wet paper drifting in the breeze through hurricane winds, floating down from the sky, with a beautiful sonnet playing in the background to lightly land on Lorgar's head, over Lorgar surviving it. That's how little I appreciate Lorgar. Tybros, probably a head taller than Lorgar, yeah. But in all honesty, it'd be Lorgar post-heresy. Post-heresy, he would win because of psychic bullshittery. In any case, thank you, Daniel. I appreciate it, bud.
The 3-meter-tall, snake-like bug still had Sarge's hull metal shield wrapped around its head, but its eyes blazed red through the metal, and a pair of horns, as well as a far more demonic-looking maw, had somehow formed on the surface of the half-slagged shield. The big change, though, was the wings. Inside the stasis field, they'd been sort of vestigial looking, but now they stretched twice as wide as the Demonthrope was tall, and they looked a lot more solid than we'd ever seen them.
This is bad.
Before this, and when they'd been sported by the possessed Narlock and the Cogton, they'd been sort of indistinct and smoky. Now they were more like clouds of ink bound into tentacle-like tendrils, and green static crackled through and around them like the field of a poorly maintained power weapon.
Yay.
All in all, it was the most demonic-looking thing we'd ever seen, and mind you, that list includes a fair few demons.
Yes.
As the two of them rose out of the crater in the facility's roof, the lightning arcing between the Demonthrope and the Inquisitor's shield steadily intensified. Just as it occurred to us that we should probably do something to help, the Inquisitor's shield disappeared with a little pop.
Bye.
The man hung there for a second, looking surprised, then let out a terrified scream as the electricity reappeared all along his body. His back began to arc, then bend, then crackle. There was a final shrill scream and a horribly gooey crunching sound, and a basketball-sized sphere of slightly cooked gore and overly dramatic clothing splatted to the ground.
Oh.
Jim and 2 of the 3 adepts screamed. Amy snickered. Tink and Twitch simultaneously yelled, "Told you so," at no one in particular. Sarge facepalmed, and Doc looked up at the apothecary. The medical marine let out a weary sigh as the Inquisitor's hat drifted down to rest upon his compressed corpse, and muttered something about needing yet another new Inquisitor. Nubby, his voice returning, pointed out the big demonic bug thing hovering over there, which was entertaining itself by tearing a hole in the fabric of reality, and asked the Marines what they were going to do about it. Grumpy and Heart Marine both let out battle cries and charged forward.
Okay.
The
Thank you, Daniel. Daniel says, in my headcanon, even though I'm 100% sure it's not true, Tybros is Conrad Curse in disguise? Night Lord's successor, big as a Primarch, never removes his helmet? Huh. Tybros is... The only thing that I can say about that is Tybros is a lot broader than Conrad. Conrad Curse was skeletal for a Primarch. Tybros is thick. He's like Wendy's. He's like the Wendy's 5 for 5. He's thick, okay? He's like huge. He's ridiculously huge. But I don't even think Tybros can remove his helmet. Thank you, Daniel. I appreciate it, bud. Really do.
Apothecary shook his head and followed them at a more sedate pace.
Sergeant Tat has the quote of it all so far. Wait, is this a Tyranid and a demon mixed monster? I would like a ticket off of this hellhole, please. Yes.
With a little mutter about them having fun with that, Nubby started to sidle towards the shuttle, only to be yanked into the air by Sarge, who was already bellowing orders and demands for information at the rest of us. Jim reported that the shuttle was still out of fuel, still had 20 AA guns pointed at it, and still had its long-range comm jammed.
Oh my god.
Tink checked his controller and said that his drone was coming back online and the Wraithbone suppressor might be salvageable if he went down to fiddle with it. Sarge digested this and then declared that since running away and calling for reinforcements weren't viable options, our only real choice was to kill the bug.
Yay.
The problem with this idea was that none of us had any desire to go toe-to-toe with something that could compress someone into paste with a glance.
Right. Yeah,
Luckily,
that's
there were
typically a
3
bad
crazy
idea.
bastards in power armor who would do it for us.
Yay.
All we needed to do was figure out a way to help the Marines without getting ourselves horribly killed in the process.
Okay, so Ronnie says, Inquisitor said, like, hi, I'm an Inquisitor and welcome to Jackass. I'm in the Order of Xenos. I can handle a simple demon possession. No.
A short debate was held, and by the time the Deathwatch Marines had opened fire, a plan had been formed.
Yay.
It was decided that Sarge and Amy would stay on the surface. They'd do their best to assist the Marines, probably by picking with the small tide of demonids that had started pouring out of the newly opened warp rift, and try to avoid drawing too much of the Demonthrope's attention.
Okay.
Meanwhile, Tink would go retrieve his drone and the Wraithbone suppressor, and then try to figure out a way to weaponize it, while Nubby would do the same thing with Fumbles. Twitch would support them and lend his skills to the whole weaponizing thing, and Doc would go along to make sure nobody did anything retarded, which technically made him the man in charge. Doc was not thrilled with this assignment. Finally, Jim and the Adepts were told to go do...
Tell me how you're going to fail an assignment before you fail an assignment.
something useful, like getting the AA guns sorted out, or unjamming the long-range comms, or finding some sort of holy artifact stored in a case marked "in case of demonic incursion, break glass."
Right.
Anything that got them out of the line of fire, really. They accepted their orders without complaint and scampered off after Doc's team towards the partially destroyed elevator into the base. Those of us in Team Doc climbed through the hole that Heart Marine had punched through the elevator's doors. Inside, we discovered the reason for the Marine's violent exit. The elevator car appeared to be stuck about halfway down the shaft, and all the lights and control panels were dark. There was a maintenance ladder on the far side of the shaft, which, judging by the massive hand and foot-shaped dents in its rungs, the Marine had used to get back to the surface. We noticed that a few of the rungs had either broken or been ripped entirely out of the wall. But the Space Marine weighed a lot more than us, so we figured it was probably safe and began climbing down. Jim and the Adepts were a little more dubious, but they eventually gave up looking for other options and followed us. After Twitch popped a rung loose, which barely missed Doc, and dropped half a level, they decided that whatever they were going to do could probably be done on the first level, and hastily exited the shaft.
There you go.
We asked them to look into fixing the elevator while they were at it.
Thank you, Slacker. Slacker says, can we get the Grey Knights or maybe the Sisters of Silence? What about the Black Templar? Is it a Psyker? Nah, it's an unknown Nid. Bring in more Deathwatch Astartes. They have experience with Xenos. Can we just nuke the whole fucking thing from orbit and be done with it? Let's just do that. Look, you're talking about a flying seahorse with wings and teeth. It's not a good thing, okay? It's a bad thing. It shoots lightning. It. No! I do not want to be turned into a flesh basketball. That is just a personal statement, a personal preference. No, thank you. Send in anything. Just nuke it from orbit. Call it good. This place is a hellhole anyway. Thank you, Slacker. The AA guns would be a loss, but what? Who cares?
The signal from Spot and the volume of Fumble's periodic incoherent psychic shouts peaked 3 levels below the stuck elevator,
Please, for the love of God, just nuke it from orbit.
and we decided to exit the shaft. Tink suffered a minor heart attack when the first thing he saw after prying open the doors was a pair of turrets aimed at his nose.
Lovely.
Luckily, they didn't seem to register him as a threat, and the rest of us managed to catch the techie as he reflectively dodged backwards into the shaft. After a little debate over whether the turrets were just waiting for us to let our guard down, which ended with Nubby tossing a half-eaten ration bar at one of them to see if they'd return fire, we all climbed through the doors. We found ourselves in a short hallway that ended with a second pair of turrets and an impressive-looking security door. Another debate was started over whether the turrets would attack us if we tried to plasma the door open, but Doc resolved the issue by checking the door's controls and discovering that it wasn't actually locked. In fact, none of the doors we ran into on our way into the base were locked, and the turrets were just as immobile as the AA guns on the surface had been.
Lovely.
Which was both convenient and disconcerting as hell. I mean, we'd just delivered a demonically possessed zoanthrope to the place. Who knew what sort of shit was penned up down here just waiting for a chance to escape? Well, actually, the recently squished Inquisitor had probably known, since, judging by the ransacked appearance of the facility, he'd been spending the last week or so gathering up everything in the place as evidence of heretical experiments, or whatever. He was a bit too busy being an asshole, also dead, to share that info with us, though.
Right.
Anyway, none of us, not even Twitch, had time to spare worrying about what was in the base or why its security was offline, because we could hear and feel the battle going on back up on the pad. We followed Spot's signal, rushing through hallways and across recently stripped rooms without incident, until we finally reached a security door with a piece of paper that said evidence storage taped to it.
Yeah, that's okay.
We opened the door, which led to yet another turret-filled hallway, at the exact same instant as some sort of 8-legged, augmetic-covered lizard monster came through the far door. We looked at the lizard monster. It probably looked at us. Something in the room behind it exploded, and then Nubby slammed our door back shut.
Okay.
A bear...
Okay. By the way, you guys want to see one of them? I'll go grab one real quick.
A second after the door slid closed, something slammed into it, leaving a large outward dent in the metal. This was followed by the sound of 4 turrets beeping to life and a sort of general fracas as they and the lizard monster sorted out their differences. Nubby, his fingers still held firmly on the close button, suggested finding another way into the evidence room, or at least waiting to see if the turrets won.
Be right back. I'm gonna go grab a pupper. 1 second. I'll go grab a pupper. Oh, yeah. Okay, let's see. I hear you. Hey, Mama Dog. Hey, Mama Dog. There you go. There you go. That's the little one. Let's see if he'll do it. Okay, let me see. This is Strida. And she's tiny. Yes. Yes. It's the Puggos. Yes, it's T-posing to assuming dominance, okay? It's T-posing right now to assume dominance. Look. T-pose. Look at his little head. Yes. She is 14 hours old, actually. As of, like, right now. Yes. The little puglar. It's the little puglar. Look at it. Yes. Yes. That's how long she is. Look at that. She's adorable. She is adorable. She looks like she's going to look just like her mama. Listen to these little sounds. I'll be right back, guys. Go put her up. Alright, I'll bring her back. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay. Okay. So, yeah, they are just little. They're little. Oh man, they're just cute. Now, the little noises she was making, the little like little inhales and stuff like that, that is like every puppy, flat out. She is still very, very young. Like I said, she was born at like 2 o'clock, probably around 2:30 last night. But she is, if one of the things, and Mr. Ruck, you don't have to apologize for any of that. One of the things about pugs is if they're bred poorly, they have breathing problems. Our male does not have breathing problems, and neither does she. And that's why we bred the two of those together. What kind of dog would I get? Oh, wait 1 second. Oh, thank you, Daniel. What kind of dog would I get if I couldn't have a pug? If I couldn't get a pug, oh, Lord, that's a tough one. If I couldn't get a pug, I'd probably go with... Oh, man, that is a tough one. Huh. I don't really know, man. I'd probably go with a weenie dog. I'd probably go with a weenie dog. That's what I'd go with. Mainly because they're psychos and they demand attention and they don't have any common sense. Diclonius says his family's all about the Dobermans. You know those little men pens? I like those too. Those are little bad. Like they are like 2 pounds and they got like 3,000 pounds of fight in them. They're so funny though. In any case, let's move on. Redacted Conspiracy, Part 4.
Doc, feeling like he should do something leadery, announced that there probably wasn't time, so we'd have to open the door and deal with the thing. The rest of us agreed, but the question of just how to do it was up for debate. After a short argument in which it was decided that trying to flash and rush a creature that had a metal plate instead of eyes and could punch head-sized dents in security doors was stupid.
Yes.
We decided to go with our other usual strategy of blowing the ugly thing up.
Yeah.
There was a problem with this plan, though. It had been several weeks of combat since our last resupply, and Twitch's stockpile of explosives...
The Xenos sounds like a rat go? Yes. Yes. I don't know. We'll find out.
Was down to...
Sounds more like a Harud to me.
Just his backup grenade and frag mine. Plus the single improvised explosive, which Sarge had let him bring on the shuttle. Twitch asked for the rest of us to pony up whatever we had, but Tink and Doc didn't have anything except for a few flashes. Doc was given shit for not saving the syringe of face-melting biotoxin that had been recently extracted from Gravis, at least until he threatened to go get another one and make Tink carry it. Nubby, on the other hand, grinned an evil little grin when he was asked, and reached into his perpetually filthy coat.
No way.
Up on the surface, Brother Bellicus of the Black Templars noticed a large group of demonic Hormagaunts moving to flank him, reached for his grenades, and swore when his hand closed on nothing.
Nubby ripped off a Space Marine's grenade without the Space Marine note. Okay, that's orky shit right there. Sawyer asked, is there some kind of legal process you had to go there prior to breeding dogs? I remember hearing of breeders in the Netherlands breeding French Bulldogs for the health of the dog. The one thing that you don't really have to go through much of a legal process, but I would not breed pugs with a bad breeder that runs something called a puppy mill. I wouldn't do that because that's just not good. You just have to make an LLC eventually. But yeah. Nubby just stole a grenade from a Templar. Lovely.
At Twitch's mark, Nubby popped the door open just wide enough for a lumpy object, which consisted of a half-dozen cross-wired laser-gun power packs wrapped with tape and nails, and 2 Astartes-sized frag grenades to be tossed through.
What the hell, Nubby?
A few seconds later, the door was reopened as far as the dent in it would allow, and we all squeezed into a hallway which was a bit worse for wear and smelled rather disturbingly like grilled groks. We all resisted the urge to see if the Xenos remains tasted like they smelled, made our way to the far end of the hallway, and discovered that the door had locked itself when the turrets had activated. Since said turrets had been pounded to scrap by the lizard thing, Tink just plasmaed the door locking mechanism and opened it to reveal a scene of pure mayhem. To start with, it wasn't an evidence room. It was an evidence warehouse. The place was absolutely massive and filled with stacks upon stacks of inquisitorially stamped boxes.
This is a good sign. Thank you, Slacker. He says, Slacker says, Nubby, after this, you're getting airlocked from stealing from the Death Watch. Okay, if there's a list of things that Nubby deserves to be airlocked from, this is actually... I don't even know why I was surprised by this. I don't even know really why I was surprised by this. It's Nubby. The fact that he just did it blatantly in front of everybody just is strangely disappointing. Yeah. Thank you, Slacker.
As well as a few hundred large metal cubes that we guessed were some sort of mobile prison cell.
Lovely.
The stacks had probably been all neat and orderly up to a few minutes ago, but the explosion that had preceded the Demonthrope's escape had occurred just on the other side of the room's left wall. The crates and cells had been scattered across the room, many of them cracking open in the process. Servitors, terrified scribes, prisoners, and escaped Xenos specimens were running in every direction. Several things had caught fire, and in the center of the room there was the mother of all three-way melees. As far as we could tell, the teams were the remnants of the ex-Inquisitor's retinue,
Okay.
a group of servitors and prisoners led by something that looked like a human, except with the size and musculature of an orc war boss. And what we guessed, based on all the extra limbs and such, was an entire gene stealer cult.
Oh, shit.
Nubby tried to close the door again, but was stopped by Doc. We stared at the carnage for a while, and then unanimously decided that we wanted nothing to do with any of it.
Yeah, like...
Don't get me wrong, we were all brave, upstanding soldiers of the Astra Militarum. The many, the expendable, the guard, and all that. It's just that we had more pressing things to deal with.
Yeah.
And honestly, we just didn't really care about who was fighting who over what.
Right. Just turn the fuck around and walk the fuck away. Let them kill each other.
In our professional opinion, they all looked like psychotic assholes, so we were perfectly fine with them killing each other to their heart's content. At least, so long as they didn't drag us into it. We began sidling around the edge of the room and towards the Demonthrope's crater, the sidle being the form of movement which best conveys, "I am not part of this, please ignore me and go about your business," /argument/murder.
Honestly, Mr. Rack, I don't think the demon is controlling them. I really don't. Why the fuck is the gene stealer cult being left alive? I have no idea. I don't know why they would do that, but oh god, Fumbles is down there. They need to check it for gene stealer.
It took a little work to find our way through the scattered evidence boxes while simultaneously trying to keep as much cover as possible between us and the melee. But aside from the occasional stray shot whizzing by or still warm corpse lying in our path, we managed to avoid most of the locals. There were only 3 real interruptions in our progress.
Tyler, where's Tyler? We need to refurbish this entire planet. Let's just virus bomb it from orbit and then come back in. We'll plant some gardens. It'll be nice, okay?
The first was when a terrified man we recognized as the scribe that had accompanied the Inquisitor on the landing pad nearly ran into us. Twitch shot him on reflex, and the rest of us refrained from commenting. The second interruption was a little more eventful. The giant man thing in the middle of the room bellowed. A cell crashed into the wall ahead of us, and something tentacular began to worm its way out.
Tentacular?
Twitch shot this interruption on reflex too,
yes.
But this time we all joined in.
Yeah.
After a few volleys, the tentacles retreated into the cell. Twitch tossed his frag grenade in after them, and we continued on our way. The last interruption occurred as we neared the crater entrance, and did not begin with Twitch shooting anyone, but that was only because Nubby grabbed his gun. As we approached the center of the crater, 3 indistinct forms that looked a bit like short-cloaked figures came around a pile of crates and practically walked into us. Nubby stopped Twitch and gestured at the rest of us to squeeze against the wall. We did as he said and watched in surprise as he cheerfully waved at the 3 figures, then directed them towards the exit. There was a greasy croaking sound, a whiff of something absolutely vile, and then the figures just vanished into thin air.
Wait, what?
That was a little disconcerting, but Nubby told the rest of us that it was fine. The cloaked whatsits were bendies, and they were wonderful people. For horrible mutant Xenos, at least.
What?
Apparently, they hung out in the sewers on some hive worlds and were a great way to get rid of things. You know, like prescribed substances that no one would buy, or pieces of equipment that you just happened to have found lying around on the battlefield, but turned out to have belonged to the commissar and now had your fingerprints all over them. Also, bodies. Great for getting rid of bodies.
What?
Anyway, wonderful people, he said, aside from the smell. The rest of us eyed Nubby, who had never intentionally bathed or changed his underwear in his life, and whose breath could tarnish ceramite, and decided not to comment. Shortly after...
What the hell were those? Those weren't the Watchers. What the hell were those?
For that slightly disturbing encounter, we reached the gaping hole that had been blasted in the room's wall.
Space Skaven?
The room on the other side was a much smaller version of the evidence room.
Those weren't her Rudd.
With a brand new Demonthrope installed skylight. We guessed that it had held 50 or so evidence boxes, one of those mobile cells, and 8-ish inquisitorial minions. Now it was filled with parts.
Lovely. Slacker says, Boss, you remember we aren't allowed to virus bomb a planet with NIDS on it. You need to use cyclonic torpedoes and crack the planet and make an asteroid belt. Yes. Actually, that makes a perfect sense. And then we can form a mining operation and make big bucks. I like it. I like where your headspace is at. Let's do it. I personally, let's see if we can't lay claim to the entire, break off a couple of continents, put a betting poll on how many continents will actually stay intact. Let's go with that. Thank you, Slacker.
Anyway, the knee-deep gore was just backdrop.
Sergeant Ted says, we take bodies and not let you get caught. Yes, yes. Jesus. Refurbished Space Skaven.
What really caught our eyes when we peered through the crater was the only intact thing in the room.
Thank you, Slacker.
The top half of our Demonthrope containment unit.
Yay.
Oh, and the half-naked woman who was crouched on top of it and singing.
What?
After an initial second of...
Tyler Hull says, I also have refurbished cyclonic torpedoes already loaded. Just give the word. Yes, yes. Let's keep going.
shock, scantily clad women being just about the last thing we'd expected to find in an inquisitorial research facility.
This is true.
We realized that things were not as they seemed. It's hard to say what tipped us off exactly. It might have been the odd shape of her ears, or the unnatural harmonics of her singing.
Or it could be the fact that she's a half-naked woman in the middle of a war zone on a planet where there's a whole bunch of shit going down, and she's singing. Okay.
Or maybe it was the words Eldar Subject Number 4 printed on the back of her tattered straitjacket.
Fuck's sake.
Regardless, our well-honed inquisitorial investigation abilities told us that while the creature prying at the containment unit was female, she was not a woman. She was also not an orc, no matter what Twitch said. So no shit, there we were. Standing in the only entrance of a room containing a half-naked, unarmed Eldar of the female persuasion, who was apparently too focused on singing to the Demonthrope containment unit to even notice our arrival.
Okay.
The question of what to do in this sort of situation is something that bored guardsmen or idle cogitator adepts might spend endless amounts of time arguing over.
Just shoot her. Not
us, though. We were above that sort of thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay, no, we weren't.
God damn it. Declonius, am I the only one who died laughing when one of the Raptors of the Night Lord's omnibus had a Skaven accent? No, you were not. Erst boat murdered Scottish screaming intense. Yep. Oh, good lord. Oh, she's stealing the Wraithbone? Yeah, it's a Wraith singer.
I mean, aside from avoiding work and blowing things up, pointless arguments, especially sordid ones, were just about our favorite pastime.
Yeah.
It was just that before we could get started, Tink noticed that a tendril of Wraithbone was snaking out towards the singing Eldar from the containment unit.
This is a bad sign.
Before any of us could stop him, the techie stepped around the corner, raised his plasma gun, and told the Xenos to stop messing with his stuff and get her own damned Wraithbone. Nubby snickered, Doc groaned in exasperation, and Twitch pulled Tink out of the way of the bolt of lightning the Eldar flung at him.
Yay!
We all reflexively ducked into cover as 2 more lightning bolts shot through the hole. And when we peeked around the corner again, the entire back half of the small room was filled with an opaque mist. The next minute or so were spent calling Tink names.
Yes.
This was not the most productive use of our time, but none of us were dumb enough to try running into the mist and dislodging the Xenos Psyker.
Yes.
Doc was especially miffed, since his whole job had been to stop the rest of us from doing something like this.
That's an impossible job. You cannot hold him responsible for the stupidity of these fuckers.
And Tink kept using that as an excuse for why this wasn't his fault. Anyway, after another minute or so of juvenile arguing, it became
It's just shocking to me why Sarge and Doc haven't strangled at least 1 or 2 members of the party at this point.
apparent that the Eldar's mist wasn't going to just dissipate on its own, and something proactive needed to be done. Unfortunately, our options were sort of limited. Tink proposed a flash and clear, but the rest of us had bad memories of the last time we'd tried that on a prepared Psyker, and made it Plan B. Nubby spoke up next and suggested going to get Fumbles, who was still making noise somewhere at the back of the evidence warehouse.
Okay.
Since this would involve either splitting up or leaving the Eldar to mess with the containment unit, and because we weren't too optimistic about Fumble's ability to go head-to-head with an Eldar Psyker, this was made Plan C.
Yeah.
Twitch began to suggest something truly harebrained, but was cut off by Doc, who decided that he'd had enough and it was time to take charge of the situation. In an odd repeat of the last time we'd faced this sort of thing, Doc poked his head around the corner and attempted to engage the Xenos in diplomacy. To our immense surprise, instead of shooting our medic in the head with a lightning bolt, the Eldar stopped singing to listen to him. Now, Doc wasn't a good smooth talker.
No.
But he did tend to radiate a sort of awkward earnestness, which can really count for something in this sort of situation.
Hey, he's succeeded twice.
The rest of us watched all this with varying degrees of incredulousness as he started off with an apology for Tink's behavior, and then began explaining the overall situation and how the containment unit figured into it. The Eldar only responded with more silence, but since that wasn't a lightning bolt, Doc took it as a good sign and moved a little farther into the room as he continued talking. It was honestly the most impressive attempt at interspecies diplomacy we'd ever witnessed.
Okay.
I mean, sure, we'd seen whole worlds shared between humans and Tau, but the Slitheads tend to be sort of wishy-washy, and there'd probably been a lot of highly trained diplomats involved in that.
Yes.
This was just one slightly naive soldier trying to convince a Xenos, who probably had a massive grudge against the Inquisition, not to mention a racial affinity for dickishness,
Yes.
to give peace a chance. It was powerful, moving really, and we all honestly believed that given enough time, it totally would have worked.
At some point, there would have been an 80s slow clap. There would have been an 80s slow clap, guys.
The thing was, though, that while Doc was making his heartfelt plea, Tink was playing around with his drone controller and managed to get control of Spot's recon sensors, as well as one of the mundane psi suppressors. And we were sort of on a tight schedule, what with the Demonthrope doing Emperor knew what above us, and Fumbles still needing a rescue. And, you know, better safe than sorry, right?
Yeah, I guess.
The Eldar had a second to be very surprised when her cloud of mist fizzled into nothing, and then a barrage of plasma and pulse rounds knocked her off the containment unit.
Hey, there you go.
Doc was not happy, even though we pointed out that our shots had missed anything immediately fatal, so if he really wanted to, he could patch the Xenos up and give her the whole friendship speech again.
No, I don't think that'll work.
With that last obstacle out of his way, Tink ran over to the containment unit to see what the Eldar had done to it, and to figure out if the fancy Wraithbone suppressor was salvageable. While he got to work, Doc grumpily dragged the bleeding Xenos into a position where he could simultaneously treat her and keep an eye on the entrance.
Just shoot the knife ear. What is it with this team and trying to save Xenos?
Nubby and Twitch loitered for a few seconds to see if they were needed for anything, until an especially loud shout for help from Fumbles reminded them that they had something better to do.
Yes.
Nubby and Twitch's trip around the edge of the big room was relatively uneventful. It seemed like everything that was capable of movement had either fled the room or run off to join the big melee, which was now reaching some sort of climax. The two troopers ignored the massive clusterfuck, pausing to let the occasional running gunfight go past or dodge a falling stack of boxes. The only real excitement was when a cargo servitor holding an obese man crashed across their path.
Okay.
And then began bashing its captive against one of the stacks like an unwanted cat.
What? Tellerhull says, just give peace a chance, Commissar. No. Declonia says, they're radicals, boss. I'd be shocked if they don't get a pet demon. I don't even know. No. Let's just refurbish them all into something more useful. Servitors.
The fat man was probably a psyker, because as he screamed for help, reality went a bit non-Euclidean.
Lovely.
And the floor started growing faces. But that might have had something more to do with the large box labeled extra heretical that he was being bashed against. Either way, the two troopers ignored the altercation and walked through the patch of warped reality with the ease of people who'd seen worse phenomena on trips to ship's mess.
True.
Aside from those little inconveniences, finding Fumbles wasn't really that hard. It was just a matter of heading in the general direction of all the psychic shouting, and then homing in on the sense of bowel-loosening fear emanating from the little psyker. So before long, Twitch and Nubby reached the corner of the room where Fumbles was hiding, and discovered what had him so worked up. They then, very carefully, stepped backwards into cover to observe the situation. The scene was a weird one. Fumbles, or some other scrawny little psyker that periodically flickered in and out of visibility and radiated fear, had been chased up a large pile of boxes by a mob of small green figures that looked vaguely like Nubby. The Gretchens were taking turns, climbing up the pile and then fleeing back down as Fumbles' aura of terror overwhelmed them.
Oh my god.
But that sort of behavior wasn't anything too unusual given their racial affinity for cowardice. It was their boss that was the weird part. You know those really secure prisoner transport thingies? Like with all the straps holding someone to a gurney, along with a face mask and maybe some padlocks?
Uh-huh.
Dial that up to 11. Replace the gurney with a hand truck being pushed by 3 Gretchen, standing on each other's shoulders, and replace the prisoner with a raving orc weird boy surrounded by an aura of crackling green light.
No!
And when I say raving, I mean it.
No.
The weird boy could speak Gothic, seemed to be using his mouth to compensate for being unable to move for anything else, and from the sound of it was, even by orc standards, completely batshit insane.
Lovely!
It was hard to keep track of everything he was saying, but in the minute or so Twitch and Nubby were listening, the primary theme seemed to be that he wanted Fumbles' head. Literally.
Okay.
You know, like attached to his shoulders with stitches and stuff.
Ugh.
He even had a Gretchen with a surgical mask standing by. From what we could tell, his motivation for this had something to do with 2 heads being better than 1, and it being the secret to Brainiomi's power. So yeah, totally nuts. And
how in the hell did they manage to capture a live weird boy? I want that explained to me. I want to know. But then again, I say that while they're chasing down a demon that they captured. Never mind.
And
I'm an
very
idiot.
frustrated with Fumbles, who kept doing rude things like refusing to come down to be decapitated, or claiming that he was only a figment of the orc's imagination. Now, as amusing as it would have been to
You hear those things, they're upset.
stand there and keep watching the orc arguing with Fumbles, it just wasn't in the cards. Shortly after Twitch and Nubby arrived, the weird boy ran out of patience and announced that Fumbles had till the count of 4 to come down,
God.
or almost squig ya. Up to this point, Twitch had just been muttering to himself about how he'd known it all along, and Nubby had mostly been trying to figure out if the box he was hiding behind, marked probably not heretical, had anything tactically useful and or valuable inside of it. It didn't. But then this new time limit kicked them into gear. Both troopers raised their weapons and got ready to shoot the weird boy as soon as it finished its counting, and began drawing on its notoriously unstable powers. Over the next 20 seconds, the orc, with the help of his Gretchen horde, managed to count up to 2.
Lovely.
Then skipped to 5, got confused at 8, went back down to 6 for another try, and finally decided to skip ahead to 13. Nubby and Twitch lowered their weapons again. Since there was apparently enough time to do something more clever than just spraying and praying, Twitch brought out the mechanical action mine that was his last remaining explosive. For his part, Nubby began waving at Fumbles while concentrating on the thought of turning Twitch invisible, while he planted the mine on the still counting weird boy. Fumbles noticed the waving and caught on pretty quickly. The little psyker faded back into visibility, screwed up his face in concentration, and Twitch faded out. The demolition trooper moved fast, which is why he was only 5 meters from the weird boy when a violent burst of energy from the warp smashed into Fumbles' mind, sending him reeling. Twitch swore as his invisibility fizzled, hucked the mine towards the weird boy like a frisbee, and sprinted back towards Nubby as the little trooper opened on full auto. Several things happened at once.
Mr. Rice says, fun fact, this weird boy's from another 40k story called Cold Shoulder, which he says I should check out.
Twitch's mine bounced off the thick metal band restraining the weird boy's head, sailed off in a random direction, was snatched out of the air by an overenthusiastic Gretchen, and promptly exploded.
Lovely!
The force of the blast knocked the weird boy's dolly over, taking the orc out of Nubby's line of fire and crushing the 3 Gretchens that had been pushing it. Nubby adjusted his aim, but as he did so, the orc psyker bellowed something. Somewhere in the pack of Gretchens, one of them exploded in a shower of green sparks and a small cloud of acrid smoke.
Lovely.
The rest surged forwards with a high-pitched wah, intercepting Nubby's fire and closing the gap surprisingly fast. Nubby held the trigger down until Twitch reached him, and they both did some quick math. Decided that 30 and an enraged weird boy to 2 odds weren't in their favor, and cheesed it. Now, despite what it looked like, this was not a cowardly retreat. It was actually a carefully planned tactical maneuver to distract the enemy from the true objective.
Okay.
Or at least it turned out that way in any case.
Okay.
Veteran retreaters that they were, Twitch and Nubby easily outpaced the Xenos, and broke contact long enough to come up with a plan and split up. Twitch stayed on the path that they'd been following. He found a nice firing position and started shooting Gretchens as they came around a handy corner.
Okay.
Racking up 7 kills without any real trouble. Then the weird boy, and the Gretchens pushing him, shot around the corner, tilting up on one wheel and bellowing, "It's squiggin' time!" as he came. There was a brief struggle of wills, At the end of which, Twitch's mind was fairly certain that he was actually a hyper-carnivorous ball of teeth.
Oh,
Luckily,
no.
Twitch's body was harder to convince, and shook off the weird boy's attack with no more damage than a few lacerations and a pulled muscle or two.
He did that to Twitch. This is going to be a bad thing.
The demolitions trooper blinked, realized how close to a fate worse than death he'd just become, and decided it was time to get running again.
Yes.
The small orcish horde let out another "Wah!" and followed him. A few dozen meters away, Nubby sidled out through a gap between two stacks of boxes and found himself back where the chase had started. A quick scan of...
Now, if Twitch had not been able to get over that and had been turned mentally into a squig, we would have had a refurbished Twitch.
The area revealed that a few Gretchen had stayed behind and were in the process of carrying the still-stunned Fumbles down from his perch on the pile. Nubby, not being one to do hard work himself, when others seemed to be willing to do it for him, pulled out a low stick and casually waited for the Gretchen to finish before gunning them down.
Really?
Then, his heroic rescue completed, the little trooper wandered over to Fumbles and checked the psyker's status by prodding him in the ribs a few times. When this elicited nothing more than a faint groan, Nubby, muttering to himself about how he always had to do everything, grabbed one of Fumble's legs and began dragging the psyker back towards the Demonthrope crater. Meanwhile, Twitch was barely staying ahead of the weird boy, who'd started emitting some sort of brilliant, crackling energy that boosted the speed of it and its minions. It really was something out of the paranoid trooper's nightmares.
Yeah.
Gretchen kept popping out of side alleys before he could turn into them, and every time he hit a straightaway, the weird boy's hand truck gained a little ground. The fear just lent Twitch even more speed, though, and anyway, he had a plan. Mind you, it lacked the large amount of explosives that would make it a good plan in his eyes, but it was still a plan. On the outskirts of the minor war occurring in the middle of the evidence warehouse, a group of Genestealer cultists finally finished off the inquisitorial minions that had been keeping them from the cell that contained their master. They clustered around the cell door and began hacking at it with their claws and weapons, but paused at the sound of approaching footsteps and turned to face the new threat. Twitch came around the corner at a dead sprint, saw the group of mutated cultists sighted on an alley on the far side of their group, closed his eyes, and triggered the underbarrel flash grenade launcher on his pulse carbine. He barreled into the stunned cultists, knocking two aside with his shoulders and nearly tripping over a third, and somehow managed to push his way through them to the alley he had targeted,
Nice.
where he slammed headfirst into a crate. Twitch railed backwards, barely dodging a falling crate marked Class 5 Forbidden Xenotech, and staggered into the alley
$10 says that thing's gonna be in the Corners border before they leave.
before any of the cultists could follow. Behind him there was a high-pitched "Wah!" and the distinctive sound of a warp-propelled hand truck slamming through bodies like a demented war chariot. There was a split second where Twitch worried that he'd underestimated the weird boy's momentum and the Xenos would just bowl through the cultists and keep chasing. But then he heard a horrible slorp sound and a bellow of "Youse gets us squiggin', and youse gets us squiggin', and youse gets us squiggin', everyone gets a zoggin' squiggin'." With that, Twitch declared the plan a success and began working his way
This is not a success. This is a failure.
towards the Demonthrope crater. After a minute or so, he ran into Nubby, who complained that he was tired of dragging Fumbles and insisted Twitch take a turn. Fumbles groaned and asked whether he could be carried upright, as the floor was really beginning to chafe.
Yes.
The three of them arrived back at the crater just in time to see Doc get stabbed in the face. Up until
Oh my god. Okay. The hospitaler is up. Let me go run out and check on her, see how she's doing. Like I said, we both had a really late night last night. I'm going to go check and see how she's doing. Give me about 5 minutes, guys. I'll be back at 14 after. Just need to see if she's okay, see how the pugs are doing, everything else like that, because they were screaming for a minute there. And they were very angry little things. So I'll be right back. Okay. Okay. All right. So, 1 second, guys. 1 second. I am going to have to bring this one to a close a little bit early because we have some stuff to deal with. And the stuff to deal with has to deal with these little things. I have fistful of Bubba Pugs. So, yes. Look at them. Look at them. Yes. Alright. So, basically what's happening right now is we need to get in there, get them taken care of, stuff like that. And I went in and asked the hospital if it'd be a good idea if I brought the stream early to a close today. And she agreed with me on that because we have a lot of stuff to get done. I start a new job tomorrow. Just a bunch of stuff like that. Yes, we're going to have to leave off with Doc getting... Yes, Mom is mad. These are the things right here. Look at them.
There's 2 more, but...
Yeah.
Yeah. We didn't want to take all her babies away.
Yeah, the hospitaler is very, very tired. And I am very... I've had about 4 hours of sleep because of these little creatures. Yes. Yes, your little beanies. They still haven't opened their eyes yet. They're not going to open their eyes for a little while.
Weeks.
Oh, listen to them. Listen. Yes, it's whining. It's had a hard day. In any case, we're going to go ahead and bring the stream to a close for right now. Yes, Lotus Ray, thank you. Pugs for the pug god. Fluff for the fluff ball. Yes. This is the one that's being really loud right now. And this one, let me see. Let's see. Okay. Hold on. There you go. This is actually Alfarius. Is this Alfarius? Yeah, it's Alfarius. Little Alfarius. They will not be arm pugs. They're going to... Oh, Lord. What is it? What is it? Yeah, we got some stuff to take care of. So I'm gonna go ahead and draw this to a close. Thank you guys for joining me. I'm sorry this is kind of short, but at the same time, it started off. I had to start off late because, well, I didn't sleep, And what? You got something you want to say? Okay, go
Let me
ahead.
give him back to Mama.
Okay, hold on.
Say bye, baby.
Look at the
Little arms. All right, let's get you back to Mama.
All right. Yeah. All right, guys. I'm gonna go ahead and head off. I do have a video recorded for tomorrow, but yeah, it's going to be like a thing tomorrow. Tomorrow I'm starting a new position. Today I got to get everything finished in there. And once I get everything finished in there, everything should be good. I'm sorry this is a little bit short of a stream, but it is what it is, guys. I'm sorry. I'll catch you guys next time. And thank you to everybody. Thank you all for showing up, because I know this was kind of late. I know this was kind of last minute. Yeah, shutting up. Thank you, guys. I really do appreciate it. You guys have a wonderful day, all right? Have a good rest of your Sunday. And now I'm going to press buttons.